Hello and welcome back to the Fantasy Playmakers. What's up, guys? For today's video, I'm going to be going through some big name players that I think you guys should be avoiding in fantasy football this season. These are guys who are very popular, but I just think that popularity is pushing their ADP just a little bit too high. So I'm going to go through 4 players that I'm going to be avoiding, and I'm going to start it off with Saquon Barkley. I will likely have 0 shares of Saquon this season. There's no doubting that he is a top tier talent. When 100% healthy, he is one of the best running backs in the NFL, and he's proven that he can finish as a high-end running back 1. We saw him finish as the RB2 overall in his rookie season. So that really tells you everything you need to know about his upside. But in my opinion, there is just too much risk to draft him as a mid-first round pick, and that is where his current ADP is. Even though he does have that super high ceiling, a lot of the other running backs going in that same range have similar upsides, and it may not be quite as high as Saquon, but a lot of those players are much safer. And right now, it does not look like Saquon will be ready to return at the start of the season. Reporters asked him if he'd be ready to return by week 1, and this was his quote. He said, "I don't know, we'll see." And that is just not a super optimistic answer. Normally players go out of their way to kind of convince everyone that they're going to be back, way before the timetable says. And I have no doubts that Saquon wants to return as soon as possible. We saw him tough it out through that high ankle sprain in 2019. But really, this is telling me that he's likely to miss a few weeks into the season, especially with the Giants doctor having a history of being very cautious, especially with ACL injuries. He's on the NFL's health board for hamstring injuries, and it's very common that when people are rushed back from ACL tears, they end up suffering hamstring injuries. So obviously he knows all about that, and it seems like the Giants are committed to waiting until he is 100% ready to return, and that is great for his long-term health, but I do think it's going to lead to him missing multiple games to start off the season. And there's also just no guarantee that he is going to be back to 100% prime Saquon, not to mention that the offensive line is still going to be poor, which is not something you want for someone coming back from a very serious injury. So I'm just not willing to take the risk of Saquon in the middle of the first round. The next guy I'm going to talk about is a wide receiver, and it is CeeDee Lamb. He is one of the most popular and polarizing young players in the NFL, and there's no denying that he is a great wide receiver and is going to have an amazing career ahead of him, but his ADP right now is absurd. It has been rising the entire offseason, and basically since I've been talking about CeeDee Lamb, I've been talking about how I don't love his ADP. I think he's going too high, and I mean that was like months ago when his ADP was much lower. Now he's being drafted in the early 3rd round, the wide receiver 10, around pick 27, and I just think that is totally insane. He's being drafted almost entirely at his ceiling with no consideration of his floor. I really don't know if he has the potential to finish much higher than that wide receiver 10 slot, with him operating primarily out of the slot. You have Amari Cooper and Michael Gallup operating out wide, and that's normally where you see wide receiver 1s operate. They're rarely ever in the slot, and I'm not trying to rip on Lamb because I think he is a great, very solid wide receiver 2 option, but he only has 1 season in the NFL. He was a rookie last year, and he finished as the wide receiver 34 in points per game. And obviously a lot of that's due to Dak Prescott being injured, but I just think this is a crazy jump to be putting him ahead of proven wide receiver 1s like Allen Robinson, even his teammate Amari Cooper. So right now, I think CeeDee Lamb is one of the worst overall fantasy values. On to a big name quarterback that I'm going to be avoiding, and it is Patrick Mahomes. And this is literally nothing against him as a player or a fantasy option. He is my number 1 quarterback. Obviously, that's where he's going. He's being drafted as the QB1, but I just don't feel comfortable drafting him at the 3-4 turn. So he's going, late round 3 or early round 4. But this year, the draft is just rich with quality quarterback options, and you'd have to be picking Patrick Mahomes over solid running back 2s. He's going in that Chris Carson range. And then you're also picking him over high-end wide receiver 2s, and I'm just not willing to do that with all the other quarterbacks available. You have guys like Lamar Jackson and Kyler Murray going a round and a half after Mahomes. And so I think the value is much better with those guys, in the mid to late 5th round. You also have very solid late round options like Brady, Tannehill, Stafford, which allows you to build a stacked team around those guys and then pick them up, late in these single digit rounds. Mahomes is a very, very safe pick, but he's definitely not a clear lock to finish as the quarterback one. The odds are in favor of him not doing that. And there are other players, guys I mentioned like Kyler Murray and Lamar Jackson, that have much higher ceilings with that rushing ability. So even though Patrick Mahomes is my quarterback one, I just think his ADP is too high to be taking him, and so I'm going to be avoiding him at that slot. The last big name player I'm going to talk about is one of the most popular and polarizing players in the NFL. It is Odell Beckham Jr., and I'm still seeing some OBJ truthers out there. He's currently being drafted as the wide receiver 28, and I mean, this is much later than we've seen him drafted in any recent seasons, but still, I just think it is too early. We have seen a full OBJ season with the Browns, and it was not spectacular. He played all 16 games in 2019, but finished as the wide receiver 35 in points per game. So that is a low-end wide receiver 3. And that was even before Kevin Stefanski came in and implemented that super run-heavy offense with Nick Chubb and Kareem Hunt. In 2019, Hunt was suspended for a large chunk of the season, so we didn't see that Chubb-Hunt combo out of the backfield. And then if you look at his 2020 season, in the 6 full games that he played in, he only averaged 3.8 receptions per game, and that's just not going to get it done. That is not enough volume, and I don't expect that to improve significantly this year. I mean, this is just an offense that's committed to running the ball. You've got Baker back there. He's not going to be throwing the ball, close to 40 times a game. They're going to be relying on Nick Chubb and Kareem Hunt, and so I just don't think the upside or even safety is there for Odell Beckham, not to mention he's coming off a torn ACL. So I'm completely avoiding OBJ this year. All right, so that is going to wrap it up for the big name players that I'm avoiding this season. I went through Saquon Barkley, CeeDee Lamb, Patrick Mahomes, and OBJ, staying away from those guys at their current ADP. If you guys enjoyed the video, please just leave a like and subscribe to the channel. And also let me know your thoughts down below. Do you agree with me that you should be avoiding these guys? Let me know yes or no. Give me your reasoning, and I'll respond to everyone who comments. Thank you guys again for stopping by, and I'll see you guys tomorrow.